Good morning, Oklahoma. I'm Curtis Hare and welcome to SUNUP. A few weeks ago, Dr. Brett Carver started telling us about the new experimental wheat varieties that the OSU wheat breeding program is putting out. SUNUP's Lyndall Stout takes us back to Lahoma to continue that conversation.
We are continuing our conversation this week with Dr. Brett Carver at Lahoma, talking all things wheat breeding. Let's start this week with Double Stop. We've heard a lot about it over the years.
Yes, and for good reason. It's a very popular variety now, and it was popular to begin with for its Clearfield package, that being the herbicide resistance trait combined with management to control grassy weeds in Oklahoma. But it's also popular because it's just a good variety, agronomically speaking, and a tremendous variety in the mill. We really want to continue and perpetuate that genetics as much as we can. Of course, we didn't really have to try to do that. It just happened because it just, the cream just rises to the top, and Double Stop has done that. We've tried on countless occasions to find a replacement or just something to continue that lineage with, and it's been difficult to beat that Double Stop lineage in terms of yield and quality together. The OK12 912C right next to it, I think, is our best shot. It took a little while to figure it out. It took a little while to clean it up. But I don't know if it's visible to the camera, but one thing that's visible to me as I look at these two strips side by side is this is a little bit earlier. The experimental is a couple days earlier than the Double Stop. It's no shorter. It's a tall variety, but it stands really well. And I just found out that kind of the hard way, if you're gonna try to beat Double Stop, you're gonna have to beat it with Double Stop genetics. This is 75% of the same parentage as Double Stop, and that was not really by design. It just happened that way. But in terms of quality, I don't think we're gonna back off one bit relative to Double Stop. This will be a gem to use in the mill and in the bakery. In fact, I think the bakers are gonna really like it because the absorption in this variety is top level. We have not seen the water absorption at this level of any of our material, and that's one characteristic bakers really like to see, is high water absorption.
And then you have one other here that you're also keeping an eye on for release. Yes,
this is taking the Double Stop lineage in a different direction. I talked about last week the Duster Diamond. It's an experimental that introduced and brought along a key resistance trait, that being to barley yellow dwarf virus. And so we've used that diamond on our breeding program quite a bit. We wanted to bring barley yellow dwarf resistance into Double Stop. That's one of the weaknesses that Double Stop has. So sure enough, we did. It worked, and had a lot of help from USDA, the genotyping laboratory in Manhattan, Kansas, to help us bring that trait along, the barley yellow dwarf resistance. So in doing that, we can go in two directions. We can keep the Clearfield trait intact, which we have in other experimentals, or we can go without the Clearfield trait. So we really have in this line Double Stop that is shorter, as you can tell, much shorter and much earlier, even earlier than the 12-912C, without the Clearfield trait. And this is not the experimental line that would be commercialized. We would have to go in, and we already have done this, and pluck out individual pure lines that would be candidates for release. We've identified about 8. We've ruled out maybe a couple of those already because of stripe rust this year, but I think we have something to look forward to.
This is one group that you're keeping an eye on, but you're also looking at some relatives of Gallagher, right?
Oh, yes.
Let's take a look at those.
Great.
For this group, we want to start off with a quality conversation, right?
Yes, and that quality conversation is invariably going to involve Gallagher, because anytime you target quality in a breeding program, you have to make sure you have the agronomic framework that's acceptable to work in. We started with several backgrounds. We have to have a background to work in that farmers are going to accept. We had Billings. We had an experimental line that we wanted to release at the time of Bentley, but we went with Bentley instead, called 10130. And then we had Gallagher. Of those 3 backgrounds, it was the Gallagher background that ended up producing what we needed in terms of yield and quality. I will say this about Gallagher, and I did not realize it until we started working on this research. Gallagher has a certain chromosome in it. A wheat rye translocation chromosome. Basically, it's a combination chromosome from wheat and rye. It doesn't exist in a lot of varieties, but when it does, it tends to reduce the quality. In fact, to a level that's unacceptable. What I didn't realize about Gallagher was that it has such good quality to begin with, and when you put this translocation in, it doesn't hurt it too much. It compensates. But this translocation acts like a cap. It's kind of like an atmospheric cap on thunderstorms. It suppresses the quality. So in Gallagher, we had all this great quality in it, but it was being suppressed by this translocation. We took that translocation out, put this gluten, what we call on these signs BX7, a gluten protein in, and voila, we have a tremendous quality package. There is no parallel. Even Baker's Ann would not measure up to the gluten strength of this particular package. You know, you get to this point, there are a lot of choices. And there are only, what, 4 choices being shown here. There's another half a dozen we're looking at. We really have not decided which one is going to be the better one to go with. But I can assure our viewers that we're going to put the best yield with this best quality together to have the package that hopefully our growers will be able to capitalize on, not in a commodity-based market. This is going to have to be a contracted market where you access this quality, and specifically this quality. Because what you want to do is you want to combine this grain with some other grain that may not measure up in terms of bread quality. I mean, this is a fixer-upper. This is something we call like a blending wheat, but it blends something up. It's like, it's taking something tragic, which happens sometimes. 2017 was a great year to think, not so much great, but it was a very memorable year in terms of our quality went down. That was a tragic year. This puts some of the magic back, takes that tragic out and puts the magic in. And we're trying to fix a problem that we know is going to happen again. And we have this genetics to blend in with the other varieties out there that just may not measure up. Of course, not from OSU.
Of course not.
No.
Well, fascinating conversation. Keep us posted on as these stories evolve and as these varieties evolve. We certainly want to stay in the mix.
Yes, will do.
Thanks a lot, Dr.
Thank
Carver.
you.
And for more in-depth conversations about the OSU experimental lines, be sure to go to sunup.okstate.edu.
It won't be long until Oklahoma ranchers will be out in the hay fields putting up those big round bales that they plan to feed to the cows next fall, winter, and spring. Proper storage of those big round bales can be a real money saver for cow-calf operations all across the country. Folks at the University of Tennessee a few years ago did an interesting study on different methods of storing these big round bales to see which ones gave them the least amount of weight loss of the bales as they were being stored. You see, they put up their hay in June and then reweighed the bales in January when they started feeding the hay. They looked at several different methods of storing these big round bales. They looked at either getting them elevated somehow off the ground. In their case, they used some old tires to set the bales on. They also looked at covering the bales with a tarp to keep rainwater off the top. They looked at those bales that had net wrap on them. They looked at bales being stored completely enclosed in a barn and compared that to bales that are just stored out on the ground with no cover whatsoever. Those that had no cover and were stored in contact with the ground, they lost 37% of the weight between the time they put the hay up in June and when they went out to feed it in January. Now, elevating the bales reduced that weight loss to 29%, which was identical to the loss they had if they left the hay bales on the ground but then covered them with a tarp. That again was 29%. If they did both, if they had the bales elevated on those old tires plus had them covered, they reduced the weight loss clear down to 8%. That's a substantial difference from 37% clear down to 8%. The bales that just had net wrap and didn't have any help in terms of underneath or above lost still about 19% of their weight loss. So that gives you an idea. Here in Oklahoma, we may have slightly lower annual rainfall than what the folks in Tennessee experience year to year. Estimates for Oklahoma conditions during that same time frame, say June to January, would indicate that we should expect about half as much weight loss in our drier climate than what they experience. But still, losing 20% of the hay that we're putting up every year can be pretty expensive if we just put them on the ground and have no cover whatsoever. So we might want to consider this year if we have a capability of putting those hay bales on something like old tires, railroad ties, fence posts. The folks in Florida even looked at crushed rock underneath the hay bales to get them away from that wet soil that causes so much damage to the hay on the bottom of the bale. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
With the uncertainty in the beef markets right now, many producers may have questions on other options for marketing their cattle. OSU meat processing specialist Jake Nelson has information on direct marketing and how that might be the path for many Oklahoma producers.
So beef producers in Oklahoma, there's an increased interest in direct marketing beef to consumers in Oklahoma. And it's not a new concept, but it's highly popular right now. I think what producers need to be aware of first and foremost is scheduling. I'm hearing discussions among processors that they are scheduled out easily 12 months. So producers need to understand that the processing sector is kind of bottlenecked. There's not a lot of capacity, and scheduling and getting your animals into those processors could be difficult right now. So a producer who wants to direct market meat needs to know with confidence, one, who their customer is, where it will be distributed, how it will be sold, because that has a direct impact on which category of processor you want to choose. Products that come out of a federal establishment can be sold into commerce anywhere in the world. Those products which come out of a state-inspected establishment in Oklahoma can only be sold into commerce within the boundaries of Oklahoma. Products out of a custom-exempt establishment, the meat products are prohibited from being sold. To emphasize, if someone wants to get involved in direct marketing, they need to at least have an understanding of who and where their consumer is, where they're located, and how they'll get the product to them. And then, of course, one of the basic fundamentals is what does my customer want? What do they want to buy from me? I have an animal that produces upwards of 60 plus different possible beef cuts. So there's a lot of questions that people need to consider when jumping into the direct marketing realm. There are a few state level permits, if you will, that need to be secured. If I'm a beef producer and I have an animal processed and I'm going to direct market that meat and bring it to a location other than the processing establishment, then the local or county health department has some authority on how I do that. And it has to do with temperature control and storage. And so I would encourage beef producers who are going to direct market is to get in contact with your county health department and ask what local county provisions or requirements exist for doing that. If you're going to hold meat and then distribute that across the state of Oklahoma, the State Department of Agriculture, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry requires that you obtain a certificate of warehouse or distribution. And we can provide a link for that on the website. We've got information, a fact sheet on direct marketing in Oklahoma and the regulations that apply to that. And then I've got another tech bulletin about to be published that talk about what types of conversation a producer and a processor should have when they schedule for processing. It's brand new, but we're pushing it through quick.
Hi, Wes Wes Lee with your weekly Mesonet weather report. Wheat producers have had a pretty tough year this season. Those that were able to dodge the hail and avoid a late freeze now have a crop about ready to harvest. What they need now is drying weather to lower moisture levels and get combines in the field. Last week was pretty wet across most of Oklahoma. This map shows the 7-day rainfall from the middle of the week. As usual, the east has gotten pounded by more rain than they can handle. Amounts were as high as 5 inches in Stigler and Weber's Falls. In the west, where most of the wheat is located, amounts were more manageable, ranging from less than half an inch in the Panhandle to about 3 inches in Tillman County. This 4-inch percent plant available soil moisture map shows there is a lot of drying needing to take place before harvest can begin. Of course, in the east is fully saturated, showing numbers of 100% or more, but so are many locations in the west, including areas in the central, southwest, and northwest counties. Texas and Cimarron counties remain very dry. The good news for wheat growers is the forecast for next week looks very dry, shown here by the brown colors due to a high-pressure heat dome expected to build. Now here's Gary focusing on the Panhandle drought.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Yes, we did get a really good drink of water across the state, a 77-county rain, but unfortunately it wasn't enough to alleviate those drought conditions that have been building over the last several months across western Oklahoma. Let's get to the latest Drought Monitor map and see what we have. So we did see a reduction of drought up into Harper County and then down into Greer County in southwestern Oklahoma, but unfortunately that tongue of moderate drought still extends from west central Oklahoma over into central Oklahoma into Kingfisher and Logan counties. And then we get out to the western Panhandle, which has been mired in that moderate to severe drought for the last few months, dating back to February. And the pitiful rainfall across western Oklahoma for the spring tells a story. This is the spring rainfall map through the current period. We see out across the far western Panhandle 1.2 to 1.4 inches of rain in Cimarron County. That's just simply not going to get rid of moderate to severe drought. The springtime deficits, again, as measured by the Oklahoma Mesonet, there you see in Blaine and Kingfisher counties 3.7 to 4.1 inches of deficit, which is pretty significant for springtime in Oklahoma, and then from 1 to 3 inches across much of the northwestern quarter of the state. To put those into context, what we would expect for this time of year, for the spring at least, percent of normal rainfall map from the Mesonet across the far western Panhandle, Cimarron County, up into northwestern Texas County, we see generally less than 33% of normal, so less than a third of normal for that time frame. And then we see that area in central Oklahoma as we get into Blaine and Kingfisher County. So we're currently going through a little bit of a dry time after that good rain of this previous week, but let's keep in mind that June is also one of our wettest months of the year, and hopefully we can get some rain across that far western drought area. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
I don't think we have to tell you that this is a pretty busy time of year for crops. Kim, you got your wheat harvest about to start. You got your summer crops going in the ground. Where are we with prices right now?
Well, if you look at the prices, let's start with wheat. You can forward contract northern Oklahoma, $4.41. It's a little less than that in southern Oklahoma. Also, but if you'll compare that to, say, SUNUP a month ago, we had that forward contract price at $4.64. The basis now is a -11. It's a little stronger, but the futures prices fell off. You look at corn, $3.05 now, $3.01 a month ago, -30, not much change in the basis. Milo at $2.90, $2.81 a month ago, so it's slightly higher there, just like corn, -45 on the D's basis. Soybeans, $7.69, up just a little bit from $7.44 a month ago, and the basis stayed at about a 90, -90 under that Nova contract. And cotton prices a penny or two less at about 56 cents, and that's 3 under that cotton contract harvest price.
It seems like all of the summer crops are remaining steady or maybe climbing just a little bit, but the price of wheat seems to be declining. Why is that happening?
I think that's it, because you can look at production around the world. Now the number one producer, of course, is China, but they're neither really an exporter or an import. They'll import a little bit, but the European Union is the number one producer at 5.3 billion bushels. Now France and Germany are the major exporters out of there. I put in the Black Sea in this because Ukraine, Kazakhstan, Russia all export out of about the same location at 4.4 billion bushels. Russia, when you break them out, is projected to be 2.8 billion. U.S., the number 3 producer at 1.9. That's down from the past. And if you look how much the exporters, of course, the Black Sea is the number one overall exporter, followed by, if you look at individual countries, Russia, number 1, European Union, number 2 at 1 billion, Russia almost 1.3 billion, U.S. number 3. Remember, you go back 5 years ago, we were the number 1 exporter. We're now number 3. So what we see is increased production around the world, lower production in the United States, increased exports by our competitors, lower exports in the United States, our price is lower.
A lot of the wheat that we have here, it's going to take a lot of money to get it to some of those markets. Is there any hope for higher prices here in Oklahoma?
Well, the only hope for higher prices is if we lose production in the Black Sea area or European Union. Now, European Union is soft red winter wheat. They compete with our soft red, not our hard red. So European Union is not really, it is too marginally, but not totally. We got transportation. We got a transportation disadvantage. We could talk about Canada. They got the same problem we do. So we got a transportation disadvantage. Another disadvantage we got is they can produce it cheaper in Russia, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. They've just got the topography and the land to do that.
Just last week, you were saying that the numbers were changing on prospective harvest numbers for Russia. Is that going to play into that?
Well, Russia, they lowered it just a little bit. I think the big wild card is Ukraine. They've got them a little over 1 billion bushels. I read a article this week that said that they might not produce near that much. It may be more like 900 million. Every bushel that comes down in that part of the world is a potential export bushel we could get. However, you got to remember Australia, they haven't been in the market for 3 years and they got another 250 million to export. So we've got an additional competitor, and that's another reason that our price just doesn't look very optimistic.
Dr. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
And here's our Extension Ag Policy Specialist, Amy Hagerman, who has information on the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program.
The Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, long awaited by our agricultural producers in the state, is live. It is open for applications. So producers can make an appointment with their county FSA office to go in and put in an application. Right now, those appointments need to be made over the phone. For ag producers who had a loss during that window of time when coronavirus was first really starting to ramp up in the state, they're going to be eligible for a payment based on their exposed inventory at the time, the inventory that they didn't already have priced, that they didn't already have risk management set up on. So the payments will be based strictly on that unpriced inventory in this window of time. That means for our producers here in Oklahoma, it's really going to be a mixed blessing depending on what crop it is or what kind of livestock that they have. Losses for the CFAP program are based on 2 very specific windows of time. To be eligible, a crop has to have experienced more than a 5% loss across this time period. But how it's calculated is they took a 1-week futures price or cash price if futures is unavailable in January, that first full week after the January 15th start period. Then they took the last full week of trading in April, that week just before Easter. If there was more than a 5% loss between the weekly average of the first week and the weekly average of the second week, then they're eligible for this program. What happened for our winter wheat producers in the state is there was a little bit of a rebound in futures price there in early April. Meaning if you had gone from the highest point to the lowest point across that entire stretch of futures trading, there would have been more than a 5% loss. But accounting for that little improvement in prices in April, it was only about a 2.5% loss, which is why winter wheat was ineligible for payments under this CFAP program. There's $16 billion set aside for ag producers, which sounds like a lot of money until you consider the number of commodities that are actually in this loss eligible category. So I would really encourage producers that the program is open now. Make an appointment in a really timely manner. Get in there and make that appointment soon, because that $16 billion is probably not going to last all the way out to August 28th when this program ends.
Today, I thought I'd share a little bit of information about vanilla. Vanilla is native to Mexico and Central America, but it's also grown in Madagascar, Indonesia, and Tahiti. These areas all provide the tropical climate that best suits the growth of the vanilla vine. And while there are more than 50 species of vanilla orchid, only 3 have found their way into commercial food utilization. Mexico was the first major producer of vanilla until the 19th century. Because vanilla vines are relatively easy to grow under the right conditions, vanilla beans, when they're first picked, are actually odorless and must be cured for their characteristic aroma to form. There are several different curing methods used, but they all have similarities. The first step is wilting or killing the beans, which stops them from growing. The second step is sweating the beans, which causes rapid dehydration and slow fermentation to occur. The third step is low temperature drying, which reduces the moisture content of the beans by about 25%. The fourth step is conditioning or aging the beans, which allows for proper flavor development. Finally, after the beans have been cured, they're graded and bundled. It's common for extracts to be made from vanilla beans, although the beans can also be used whole or in powdered form. Vanilla extracts are basically made by crushing the beans, mixing them with a solution of water and ethanol, and then removing the residue from the liquid. So whether it's a jar of cookies or a bowl of ice cream, vanilla's flavor is as popular as it is distinct. For more information, please visit sunup.okstate.edu or visit fapc.biz.
And that about does it for us this week. Remember, you can go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu, and you can also find us on YouTube and social media. I'm Curtis Hare, and have a great week, everyone. And remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.